were the juxtaposition of those types of names and tropes and the beauty of the prose, because it's so beautiful, really juxtaposes with the darkness and the melancholy, and it becomes this overwhelming, haunting sadness. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mass Books. My name is Mariana, and today I am here with my first ever Friday Reads video. I am super excited about this. I love Friday Reads videos, and I've been wanting to do a Friday Reads since the beginning of my channel, but for some reason or another, I always think of other videos to film, and I love doing fun tags, so I do a lot of those, and TBRs, and then also, because Friday Reads is in the middle of the week, it always feels intimidating to do. I'd been playing around with the idea of a Friday Reads on Sunday kind of a thing, but I finally got around to doing it. So anyway, here I am. Precisely because this is in the middle of the week. In order to make it easier for myself, I'm going to try to do the minimal editing thing. So before I start, just a reminder, English is my second language, so there are a lot of a lot of likes while I think about the things that I want to say. So that is one thing, and I'm saying it at the beginning because often I do edit those out because I don't know, I'm embarrassed. So I'm going to try not to do that. I'm just going to try to do the minimal essential editing thing. And yeah, so that being said, well, Friday Reads is one of my favorite things to do in real life. Although in real life it's not Friday Reads, it's Everyday Reads. My mom and I, we talk about the books we are reading all the time, and we just go back and forth on excruciating detail, talking to each other about the books that we are reading. Because we have very different reading tastes, I'm not going to read the books she's reading, and she's not going to read the books I'm reading. We just like to talk about them anyway, and we do go into detail. Even though I'm not going to read the book that she's reading, she will go on detail about it, and the same goes the other way around. And that's something that I wish was a bit more on YouTube. I feel like sometimes in YouTube, people watch videos to know, like to find book recommendations, which we all do. Everyone does this. I do this. And to find books that they can buy to potentially read someday. But I feel like just watching videos and making videos just for the sake of talking about books and of hearing people talk about books is something that is less appreciated, and I wish there was more of it. That's one thing I like about Friday Reads videos, is that they are very rambly and very improvised and very casual, and yeah, I just really like that nature of Friday Reads videos. So while editing, I'm going to try to not cut myself out too much, because sometimes I do that because I think I'm rambling too much, it's going to be boring, and so I cut myself. So I'm going to try not to do that with this video. If you're watching this current ramble in the video, it means that I'm not cutting myself so much. So with that being said, let's just move to the books, which is what we are here for. Today I'm going to talk about some history and some medieval literature, and that is both medieval literature, meaning literature written in the Middle Ages, but then also a medieval epic that was written in the 90s. So not really medieval, but inspired in the medieval era and situated in the medieval era. And I was going to start with the medieval portion of the reading, but I think I'm going to start with the history, with Historathon, because for the medieval, I see myself potentially rambling. Actually, I ramble about everything, but I'm going to start with Historathon. And for Historathon, I want to talk about the main book that I am reading, because I do like to dip in and out of books, but mostly I have been reading The Origins of Power in Mesoamerica by Enrique Florescano. I have talked about that book in other videos in my channel, and I am loving that book. And what I wanted to talk about that book specifically about was an error in judgment that I made when I started reading it, and I have it right here. So the copy I own of that book is this big copy that is actually an older edition. It's not the newest edition available. And because I already own this edition, I decided to read this edition. Small problem. This is super heavy. It's not the chunkiest book I own, but it's the heaviest book I own. I wish you could come across the screen and hold this book. I don't know what paper they used for printing. It's kind of like a couché, if you know about paper, and I'm actually not sure if in English it's also called couché, but it's like a thick couché, and that it's super heavy. It's super heavy. I've talked before about problems that I have, like motor skills problems from a neurological issue that I have, some tumors and stuff, and that is the reason why I mainly read ebooks now. But I do love also reading paper books. I feel like if you love books, the love of paper books never goes away. And so I do like reading paper books once in a while, but I am slower with those. I know that I am slower with those. And so because of that, I wasn't trying to overburden myself with too many books for Historathon, because I wanted to focus on this one. And because it's not so chunky, I would have had enough time to read it in the 3 months that quarter one takes. However, it's so heavy and so hard to handle that I kept putting it off, even though I was super enjoying it. And so what I did was I read the Kindle sample in my Kindle, and I flew through that. But then when that was over, I picked up this copy. And I didn't want to buy the Kindle version because it's not super expensive, but it's more than I usually pay for Kindle books. And so I didn't want to do that. And I already owned this version. And because I have this whole low buy thing or whatever, I was like, I'm not going to buy the new edition. Fast forward to today. I am currently reading the Kindle edition that I ended up buying. And here's a lesson for me, because yes, of course, like if you own something, it's better not to buy it again. Like, yes, my logic was sound, but if you have motor skills and you cannot handle a physical book of this size and weight, then go ahead and buy the ebook that you can actually read, because it doesn't make any sense to own this book and not want to buy something else because you own it, but then not read it because you cannot physically handle it. So I ended up getting the Kindle book because I wanted to continue reading it because it's so good. And now that's why I'm reading. So the past week I had been reading that. I was going to be flying through that, but flying for my standards, I'm a slow reader. And to mention what the book is about, this is about the origins of power in Mesoamerica. And so the book, the author is investigating into the origins of the different Mesoamerican states, like state as in like the political organization of a state, and the way that the different states throughout Mesoamerica had their origins, and then it talks about their form of political organization, of that the origins of power in Mesoamerica. So it's divided into several chapters for different states, different civilizations. There is a chapter on the Olmecs, which I already read. I kind of want to talk more about the book specifically because I know, at least in the Discord, some people have expressed interest in the Historathon Discord. I mean, some people have expressed interest in the Olmecs, and it's a very interesting topic. I didn't know a lot about what is said here. Oh, this is one other thing. So the paper edition that I had is an older edition, and I do, when it comes to history, or science and stuff, but I don't read a lot of science. But history, I prefer newer editions of books because the research is more current. And so, because I was so dogged in my idea of I'm going to read this physical book, I hadn't even thought about that. And once I started reading the physical book, I realized that it's actually very revised. So I went back and I reread the whole thing, which is also why I am doing slower, because I went back and read what I had already read in the paper book, because I wanted to read the newer edition because it is very revised. And so I think the newer edition was published like in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a new publishing, so it's very current. And so the research into the Olmecs specifically and into Teotihuacan, which is another chapter, is very interesting because there has been historically a lot of debate about the nature of the Olmecs, the nature of Teotihuacan, and there are a lot of things that we know now that we didn't know. And so I'm glad that I switched to the Kindle edition. So I read a chapter on the Olmecs and I read a chapter on Teotihuacan, which is a lesser known civilization that I wish it was more widely known. And this is one of the things that bugs me about colonization, is that all of these civilizations are like meshed into a single bucket, and Teotihuacan is one of those civilizations that would fascinate a lot of people because of all of its mysteries and the power that it had throughout Mesoamerica. I'm currently reading the chapter on the Mayans, and there is a Mayan. One misconception about the Mayans is that there was a Maya civilization. The Mayans were the people that established in that area of in that geographical region, but there were several Mayan kingdoms, Mayan states, Mayan chiefdoms. There wasn't like a single empire. Actually, empire wasn't a concept around in Mesoamerica, but that's another topic. So I'm currently reading the chapter on the Mayans, which is super interesting because I knew nothing about the Mayans, and that's a whole other topic also that I could go on, but I'm not going to because it has to do with like current cultural ideas in Mexico and stuff. But I'm currently reading that chapter, and there are Mayan kingdoms, I'm going to call them kingdoms, that were legitimized by Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan was known in Mesoamerica as like the maker of kings, or like the legitimizationer. The place where kings went to be legitimized. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. And so there is so much we don't know because it was such an important and revered and sacred civilization. It became a pilgrimage site, and so it was sacked a lot in Mesoamerican times. So tombs are empty, stuff is empty because it was sacked during the time. So there's so much we don't have. It's such a mystery, and it's not that I am encouraging conspiracy theory videos. But I feel like if Teotihuacan was more known, there would be a ton of conspiracy videos about Teotihuacan because it's just such a fascinating culture. So, as I said, I'm currently reading the chapter on the Mayans. Fascinating stuff. I could have done a Friday Reads video just talking about this book, but I want to move on. So that's super interesting. I'm very much looking forward to the next chapter, which is about the Toltecs or Tolanchicocotitlan and the saga of Quetzalcoatl. And the final chapter is about the Aztecs, the Mexica. The Aztecs, the Mexica. So I will report back on that one. Now I'm going to move on to an audiobook that I'm listening to, and it is, according to blurbs, an ambitious medieval epic. One of those books described as like an ambitious writing project that took the author a long time to write because of a 20-year hiatus where she went into a big depression. And speaking of that, it's actually, I do think I could call it the saddest book I have ever read. It's crazy how much it's affecting me, where I have been in a super melancholy mood lately, and I was wondering why, and it suddenly hit me that it's because of that book. But it's also the most hauntingly, impossibly beautiful book I have ever read, which just so happens to be fantasy. But for the literary snobs out there, it's also allegory. So I feel like it's one of those books that, even though it's objectively fantastical, it's so beautifully written, and the prose is so uh, honestly award winning prose, like snobby literary winning prose, that type of prose. It's so amazing that I feel like someone who doesn't read fantasy would read it and say, oh, it's allegorical, because it is overtly allegorical. And so that is Forgotten King Gudú by María Matute, a Spanish author from the 50s, although this was finally published in the 90s after the 20-year hiatus. This one really bugs me and baffles me that is not translated. Why is this not translated? And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I feel like if this was written by a man, it would have been translated. And I feel like if this was a male author, she would have acquired like genius status in the community as opposed to just being forgotten. Because this is an author who was alive during the Civil War period in Spain. She had a super tragic life. She ended up moving to the States, running away from a really awful marriage, and she ended up working and writing in the States, in the United States. And she, because of her life was super tragic, a lot of people died in her life. She had a great love after all of this, and he died in a car accident, and so she went into a heavy depression for 20 years. And then this book, the Forgotten King Gudú, Olvidado Rey Gudú, she was writing this book when she went into that depression, so she stopped writing it, and then after 20 years her editor invited her to move in and settled like a writing headquarters for her, and she told her, you have to finish Forgotten King Gudú. So she finished it, and she eventually published it in the 90s, and apparently it was a big boom. It's known as like a classic of modern Spanish literature. The author is very well revered, or was very well revered, but after her hiatus, she got lost and she got forgotten, and people stopped writing about her. So this book was actually, according to what I've read and seen, this book was a big splash in the publishing world. It was a big bestseller. There are multiple editions of this book. According to what I've seen about her life, she is the most internationally awarded author from Spain. Why is this not translated? I do not, for the life of me, I do not understand. So to talk about the book a bit, because yes, this is, as I said, it's a super chunky medieval story. It is fantastical, but it's not like your typical medieval fantasy with a straightforward plot. I would call it an adult fairy tale. It is very much inspired by fairy tales and very much inspired by medieval history. And it is very slow, very beautifully written. It is very allegorical. And so the basic premise is that you are following the history of the kingdom of Olar, which is a invented kingdom. But you are following the history of Olar since before it was a kingdom. So you start following one of the leaders, let's say, and their advancement and their story of conquering other territories until it becomes a kingdom. And then you see the first king, and then you see the son of the king, and you see the king Gudú, who is the title of the book, Forgotten King Gudú. So I'd say the first half of the book you're following the formation of this kingdom, and then from around kind of half, a bit before half, up until the end, I'm almost at the end, you are following the reign of King Gudú. It is a super tragic story because it is very much like the writing is very much inspired by fairy tales. So the writing, the names of the characters, the tropes, the stories, it's very poetical and very childlike, but very adult, which makes it even more impactful because it's so sad, so melancholic, so dark. And you have characters with names like, I don't know, like Thumbelina, that type of name, where the juxtaposition of those types of names and tropes and the beauty of the prose, because it's so beautiful, really juxtaposes with the darkness and the melancholy, and it becomes this overwhelming, haunting sadness, melancholy that just surrounds your life. I feel like I have read sadder books, sadder fantasy books, in that they are more over the top sad, where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe they died, how did that happen? And you suffer, but you love suffering with other people, and you put ugly crying gifs on Discord, that type of a thing. I love those types of books, and yes, of course they are sad, but this is a quieter, slower, haunting sadness. There is a character, because this is very allegorical, there is a character that ultimately ends up being sadness, and because of the way it's written, because of the magical aspect, because of the fairy tale aspect, this character, who is like a nymph type of a character, becomes the water, because it's also very poetical, right? Because it's the sadness, it's the tears, and she becomes the water. And because she is sadness, and because she is the water, the river that flows throughout the kingdom, the fog that in warm days the sun evaporates the river, right? And it turns into fog. So it's literally like a river of sadness and a fog of sadness throughout the kingdom. And it's a kingdom where children cry at night, but they don't know why they cry at night. All the characters are living in tragedy, in sadness, but it's like it's that, because it's the fog, the literal fog of sadness haunting, surrounding the kingdom. And in that same way, it haunts you as a reader. It surrounds you as a reader. So it's this contrast of this, the most impossibly beautiful prose you have ever read, with the most poetical, beautiful allegories, in such a hauntingly melancholical way that it just overwhelms you. But it's so beautiful. It's funny because this has taken me so long to read, because it's so hard to read. And I actually, I read about half, and then I stopped, and that was, I think, it was last year, I think. But I did want to finish it, because I knew one of my favorite Spanish booktubers called it her favorite ending in literature, so I did want to see where it went, but I didn't make myself read it. I couldn't go back, and then I watched a video about the life of the author, and I learned that halfway through the book she goes into this depression and stops writing. And so I was like, okay, so I stopped reading halfway, and then after a long time she picks it back up and finishes it. And so I thought, okay, now I'm going to pick it back up and finish reading it. And after knowing the story of the author's life and reading this book, it's even more meaningful, but also I am really enjoying the experience of this slow read. I hope one day it gets translated, because it's just such a powerful story, and I feel like maybe it doesn't get translated because it's cataloged as fantasy, but it can't really be sold as like a Game of Thrones, or like I don't think that the audience that likes straightforward medieval fantasy would necessarily like this. And I do think that a lot of people that read literary fiction or medieval fiction or history, I do see them loving this book. So I feel like it's one of those weird books that falls into a weird liminal space of publishing, where it's like, it's not necessarily for every fantasy reader, but it's also not necessarily for every literary reader. And so how do you market it? So I think maybe that's why it's not translated. But I feel like if this got translated, and got blurbed as an ambitious, epic, medieval, allegorical, literary, fantastical allegory. Something like that. I do think it could find an audience. Here's hoping. Okay, and finally, I just want to real quick talk about a thing that I've been doing that I've been really enjoying, and that is that I have been reading at night before bed. I have been going through the Lais of Marie de France. I don't know if they are Lais or Lais. I think Lais. These are kind of like short stories, written in the Middle Ages. I think these are 13th century, written in the 13th century, maybe. Around that time. I'll correct myself on screen if not. But yeah, these are short stories about courtly love. So if you know about medieval literature, you know about the concept of courtly love. And these are just really lovely stories written in the Middle Ages about romantic stories, different romantic stories. I have been going through these at night before bed, and I am super enjoying that practice. I find that I do prefer reading paper books at night, even though it's harder because of my of the I have a hard time reading on paper because of the size of the font nowadays. And so, yeah, it's harder to read paper at night, but I feel like I do prefer it. And it's easier to go to sleep after reading a paper book. Even if you read on Kindle, there is supposedly this technology that feels like paper. It's not quite, right? But I feel like I if I read plot heavy books before bed, I it takes me longer to go to bed because I'm just thinking about them. But then I started reading history before bed. And I realized that that's just like reading, real life Game of Thrones before going to sleep. And so it's the same thing. I'm still in bed thinking this Mayan king killed this other, and then they're going to invade the territory, and like how is the battle that happened. It's still a lot. It's still a lot, right, for your brain. Whereas this one is just lovely and quiet. And so I thought, wait a minute, should I just start that as a practice, just reading medieval literature before going to sleep? Currently, I do have this idea of like, oh, medieval literature before bed. I have a long list of medieval literature that I want to read. I read some, not a lot, and I do want to read more, so that would be fun. So after I finish this one, I potentially could read either. I have this version of Tristan and Isolde from a Mexican publisher that I really adore, and I should really get through it because I have a big collection by them. But then I also have the Canterbury Tales that I should honestly once and for all read, so I could do that too. And then I also have these two beautiful used editions that one of my cousins lent me. She studied Spanish literature in university, but these are super awesome versions because they come with a lot of extra material. So like it has a big introduction, and then there's a lot of annotations and footnotes and stuff. But then also I've been wanting to read some Chretien de Troyes, which I don't own but I could buy, and also the Song of Roland, which I've read fragments but I've never read it in its entirety. So, I have options. I will keep you posted with those plans. I do feel like it'll be either Canterbury Tales or Tristan and Isolde, one of those two, after I finished the Marie de France. So that would be it, because I've rambled enough. I mean, I know these videos are rambling, but still, I have to post it by tomorrow, and I need to move this along. So, that would be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I am going to attempt to do Friday Reads videos more often. I don't think I do them weekly because, as I said, I'm a slow reader, so I wouldn't be able to talk about new books every time. But I guess I'll try to do them when I have new books to talk about. Mm, yeah, I was going to do some like books I've read throughout the year. I'm not going to do that anymore. And also, on Sunday, if all goes well, I will publish my pile of possibilities for Historathon Quarter 2. I already filmed it, but depends if I have time to edit that. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you hopefully on Sunday, and if not, hopefully on Monday or soon with my Quarter 2 pile of possibilities. I will read you in the comments, and in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.